Good morning, this is Big T with Big T Studio. I'm coming to you this morning to talk about installing Linux. There's a lot of discussion about whether or not Linux is a viable alternative to Windows. I'm not a computer professional in the sense that I'm the end-all be-all of all knowledge relating to Linux versus Windows versus Mac. I'm a hobbyist more than anything, and I've used Mac, I've used Linux. Of course, my computer days go back to working with a Commodore 64, if that gives you an idea. So I wanted to basically do an install feature on Cachy OS. On DistroWatch, it's the number one ranked Linux distribution. Now, for the longest time, it was Mint. So why does all this matter? To give you an idea of kind of what you're dealing with Linux, Linux is not like Windows. Windows is an operating system, basically comes on your computer. When you buy the computer, it's what you've got unless you bought an Apple system or a Chromebook. And for people going back 20 years, Windows was just the less expensive alternative. But Windows has its own problems, and they've really shot themselves in the foot with Windows 11. In all honesty, Windows 10 does everything that you could ever want to do with a computer. That being said, if you went back to Windows XP did everything that you could ever want a computer to do. There's no great value in going to the different versions. All you're getting in terms of can the operating system work with the hardware that is underneath it was established all the way back in Windows XP. Now, the idea behind some of this stuff on Windows in the early days was if you bought a computer, Windows could work with your computer, but if you added anything to your computer, like a sound card, well, whoever made that sound card had to make it work with the OS. If you bought a video card, whoever made the video card had to make it work with the OS. If you bought a network card, whoever made the network card had to make a driver to make it work with the OS. So going with that mentality, the whole idea of the operating system is just for the operating system to interact with the computer as a hardware device to do whatever you tell it to. And as companies unified, a fancy word, computer companies started making all-encompassing computers that did everything. If you wanted to play a game, they had to have the hardware that made playing the game possible. So computers started stacking in hardware into the system already, and every now and then you'd have a niche item that you might want to plug in, like an external hard drive or a camera. And the different ports along the way have evolved until they're basically the USB-A and USB-C ports in terms of the configuration of the ports, and how they work with the computer is different in and of itself. But Windows hasn't changed in terms of what it can do. Now, what they have done is they've changed how you interact with the outside world. Starting with Windows 10, they started pushing for you, the consumer, to have a Microsoft account that was your gateway and your permission to use their operating system. Just because it came on the computer that you purchased and that computer company paid for that license doesn't mean you have a right to use it until Microsoft hands down their blessing from on high, like a Greek god that tells you you may access the internet. That's probably a little bit too deep, but basically Microsoft wants you to sign your personal information into their system, and the magic word is telemetrics. The telemetrics says if you go visit a site on Best Buy, then they're going to go to Best Buy and say, we notice this person's buying from you online. Do you have ads that you would like us to present to them in the operating system? And Best Buy could go, you know what, that would help us out. We'll pay you to send them advertising to their computer, and we'll give you $1 billion to make sure our ads feed to your user base. And Microsoft says, thanks for the money. And then you, the consumer, start getting inundated with ads on your computer for Best Buy. Well, you're already a user of Best Buy. If you want to purchase something, you know what you want already. Why do you need more ads? Of course, it may be a beneficial thing if your kid's using your computer in the house and you're gone and they click on hot woman with big boobs and you start getting ads for oversized brasiers. Well, then you know that somebody's been looking at something that required oversized brasiers. But truthfully, I don't know how you feel, but I do not need my computer advertising for me. I get enough of that from YouTube, and that's annoying enough. But when I'm just doing my basic work, I may be writing a computer program. I may be working on spreadsheets. I may be working on a script for a video or a script for a movie to sell to the studios so that I can make the next great American flick. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. I don't want to be bothered by the constant dinging in the lower right-hand corner telling me that I've got some new ad. And all that comes from Microsoft snooping into my business and looking at what I don't want them to look at. It's my computer, my time, my secrecy, and my privacy. Now, the other online personalities will tell you that everything that's going on your computer that you're watching is, that's what I keep doing wrong. I'm sitting here putting this together while I'm dictating some thoughts and opinions about what I'm dealing with. There's what I really wanted to get started with. I don't want to hear that racket, so let's turn that down. All right. So why would you want to go to Linux? You don't have to go to Linux. You can go with whatever you bought on your computer. But some of you are using Windows 7 computers, some of you are using Windows 8 computers, some of you are using Windows 10 computers. It doesn't matter what computer you're using. The option to go to Windows 11 for some of you, the only option is buy another computer. And quite frankly, if your computer is capable of doing everything you want it to, as it has done for the last 10 years, you do not need to buy Windows 11 or a new computer. Just as something to think about, I'm going to start this video here so that we can kind of see what's going on, and when we get to slow parts, I'll jump back to this idea. So with Cachy OS, Once you create your thumb drive, I'm not going to go into that. There's thousands of videos that shows you how to create a thumb drive. If you put it in and start up your computer, um, you're going to be given an opportunity to install the operating system if it doesn't already exist. Most Linux distributions, no matter what the distribution name is, seems to have that installer pop up when you start up your computer the very first time, especially if using a thumb drive. Um, so Cachy OS is no different. It starts off by asking the basic questions. What's your language? If you're installing Windows, Windows will ask you your language at some point. The order that it asks these questions may be different, but in this case, you're asked your language, your time zone, and your keyboard. And as long as the defaults are working for you, you can just keep hitting next. Now, talking about this step, the Grub bootloader. The Grub bootloader is something that's been on Linux systems since the early days of Linux. I've seen Grub for years. So it's asking if I want to go with Grub or Limine or Limine. I'm going to stick with Grub just because it's what I know, it's what I've dealt with. The Limine or Limine may be perfectly fine. It seems to be the default choice for Cachy, but because I've used Grub, I'll go back to Grub. Next step, you're going to be getting into the disk partitioning. Now, if you only have one disk, you're going to erase your disk to move forward. This is a situation that goes with, I'm going to pause this for a minute and kind of come back to it. Operating systems, let's go back to the Windows 95 model. Windows 95 was prone to crashing constantly for the end user. The internet had not really taken off at that point, so what users experienced was just the fact that there were bugs in the operating system that hadn't been fixed yet. Now, the bugs could have existed in the operating system, or the bugs could have been in the program that you were using at the moment. Back in the Windows 95 days, Windows was its own thing, your Office suite was its own thing, your web browser, if you had a web browser, was its own thing. Any program that you created or game that you bought, which there were a blue million of these things, and they existed for you to try and buy, of course. Preference always being that they wanted you to buy, but not everything was gold. Some were downright garbage, and they crashed your system constantly. So Windows had a method that you could do. You could partition your disk into two different pieces, but when your disk is only 64 gigabytes big, and you thought you were flying high if you could afford one, otherwise you had much smaller disk spaces back in those days, you could separate the disk into parts where only the operating system existed and the files that you actually wanted to save existed. And if your Windows system became corrupted, you could just reinstall the system without losing your important stuff. Today, I don't think as many people do that because it's so easy to save your information on a thumb drive or on an external drive, or even the web. The web has so many places to save the actual data you want to save. So disk partitioning, I usually just go with erase the disk and start over. But if you're coming into this, I highly recommend saving all your data. Saving your data, backing up. There's two kinds of data. This goes back to the early days of computer systems. There's two types of data: data that is backed up and data that is lost. Your data is your pictures, your songs that you've downloaded, if you downloaded hard copy music, your game saves. Your games, you'll just about always have to re-download games if you do the download stuff. But if you're coming to Linux, chances are you're not a big gamer, because Linux can work with Steam OS, and there's clients, there's all kinds of ways to work with games, and you get some games but not all, and sometimes the gaming experience is not that great. But for the person who just wants to surf the web, write a text document, work on a spreadsheet to study their finances, calendar app, log on to Facebook in a web browser, check their Instagram stats. Chances are, if you're using a 10-year-old computer and you're considering this, I don't think you're the Instagram, that Snapchat person. So the basic thing is the web for research and Office apps for office and productivity. Can Linux work for you? No doubt. No doubt. That's kind of exactly who Linux is perfect for. So let's get back to this, and you're making selections on what kind of desktop you would want. I need to hold that for a second. Your desktop is how you interact with the world, and you're going to find out in Linux that you will use a terminal from time to time, just because the underlying operating system is its own beast, its own thing. The distribution you have has the Linux kernel and, in some cases, various desktop managers, or windowing managers. Call it whatever you want to. It's what you, the user, actually interfaces with most of the time. Cachy comes with KDE by default. KDE is very slick. K desktop environment. I don't know what the K actually stands for, but KDE and GNOME were your two originals, and you can install GNOME with Cachy OS. There's no problem in it. KDE is more Windows style, and a lot of people really like it because of how extremely similar it is. GNOME, a lot of people say that it's Mac styled. I don't know if I'd call it Mac styled. It does things that it doesn't happen on Mac. So jumping into the argument of do the Mac thing, do the Windows thing, no matter what operating system or distribution you work with, you're going to have to learn that operating system or that distribution's way of doing things. And that's where you go back to the terminal. The terminal has commands that you can reference that have nothing to do with your desktop, and it just fixes what's underlying underneath. That's why you will have to learn some things that I will show you on this, on how to handle commands. And take some of what I say with a grain of salt, because like I said, I'm not the end all be all of Linux. So getting back to the install, once you choose your desktop, in the case of Cachy OS, I'm installing the default KDE. After that, your next is to set up your username and your password. Now, this isn't like Windows where they hound you to death to create a username and password so that you can use everything Microsoft and they can transmit your data to everybody. This is just so that your computer is tied to you, and you can put 20, 30 people on your computer, hundreds, it don't matter. And all of you can use the same computer with a different login name, and different information is saved to each user. In the world of inexpensive computers today, everybody's got their own system, so no one really ties to that multi-use system all that much anymore. It can be done, but it's a security thing in terms of the hardware and your usability of it, not somebody at the Linux headquarters are looking to try to sell you something better. That is not how this works. At least I've not found it on this distribution. Now, going through the install, every installer goes through the process, and I don't care if it's Windows, Mac, or any other version of Linux. If you're going to have a desktop environment instead of a terminal environment, there's going to be a lot of software installed, and it's going to take time. There's a lot of libraries and data that has to be added from the USB drive to the hard drive on your computer. And you're traveling at the speed of your USB drive, not your computer's internal drive. So if it takes 10 minutes to read a gigabyte of information and you've got 5 gigs of information, then you're going to have about 30 minutes tied to your computer. So that's what's slowing you down. Now, getting back to the Windows environment and some of the things that we're talking about here, what can you actually do with your computer? Well, sky's the limit, but I'm going to put a caveat here, and I'm sure some people will raise hell on me for saying it. If you want to record music, you can record music with Linux. If you are using strictly hardware, such as an audio interface, a guitar plugged into an amp and a microphone in front of the amp, you're going to be fine. You can do that. If you want to record a set of drums with an audio interface that is class compliant, you're going to be fine. If you want to record a singer and you have an audio interface, you're going to be fine. But if you want to do software synthesizers where you can buy Arturia, Soft Synth Collection, B Collection, and have 20 different synthesizers, you are not going to do that in Linux. You're going to have headaches and struggles because none of these programs like Native Instruments or Arturia specifically have an installer that can install to Linux. If 1 million people in the world use Linux and only 1% of them would use soft synths, then none of those companies are going to take the time to make an installer to work with Linux. They just don't care. They don't see the customer bases there. So you can use soft synths by using what's called emulation layers. The most famous one on Linux is called Wine, but it does not always work. There was a fellow that developed a program called Yawbridge, and it worked wonderfully until Wine version 9.2, and then afterwards we're up to version 11.2 on Wine, I think. But after 9.2, it quit working, and since he's a one-man operation, nobody's fixed it. But up to that point, you could install native instruments, and I installed that XLN Addictive Drums once using it. It was possible to get it working, the wine part, but you got to jump through a lot of hoops to make this work. So if you're doing music production, I don't recommend trying this. Video editing. There's a version of a video editor called KDE Live or KDN Live. I've tried it and had middling results. But there's a DaVinci Resolve version, and I'm going to show you that it can install on this. And I may do a video independently where I'm trying to edit a video and you keep running into problems. If you're a professional video editor and that is your goal in life, is to be a video editor, even with DaVinci Resolve on Linux, I don't recommend it. One of the problems you have with DaVinci Resolve is that there are certain codecs that are not necessarily made for Linux, the two being H.264 and H.265. These are proprietary formats, as well as the audio codec, which is called AAC, I believe it is, or ACC. So DaVinci can't give that away to install on Linux. So the only way you can do that is to get the purchased version of DaVinci Resolve. So that goes from being free software to paid software, and it's in the range of $2.99, I believe, give or take. I can't fault them. If they have to pay a licensing fee for every download that uses it, then they have to be able to recoup that cost. So it can't be a free item that they just throw out into the universe. But if you're not using those codecs, then it will probably work for you. DaVinci Resolve may be perfectly fine. But if you're in the video realm, I recommend you just stick with Windows and Mac and deal with the headaches that are involved with Windows. And if you're tired of the bullshit that goes with Windows, go get a Mac. It works fine. It does video like no other. Now, getting back to DaVinci Resolve on Linux. Now, if you want to pay for DaVinci Resolve, that's perfectly fine. I say do what floats your boat. You're the decision maker in this process. But those people who have specialized needs will struggle with Linux. Can a photo editor work with Linux? Yes, they sure can. GIMP, G-I-M-P, General GNU Image Manipulation Program. GIMP was one of the early programs that was used to edit shots on the Titanic movie that James Cameron did back in the 90s. So it's been around a long time. It's not the same as Photoshop, but it's extremely similar. So can you use it? If you're a home user that just wants to take the red eye out of a photograph, yes, it works just fine. You want to blur the background? Yes, you can run a lasso around it, mask it, blur the background. Yes, Photoshop and GIMP work similar in the way that GIMP really tried to be Photoshop 5.0 back in the early days, but both of them have grown in two different directions and they both do just fine. So a photo person, I guess the only problem you'll really run into is if you're taking pictures on a phone that has a codec that GIMP does not recognize. And that will be your limiting factor. The average home user with an Android phone probably be just fine. So where else can Linux shine? I've said it before, if all your programs that you use are on the web, such as Google Docs or Facebook or Instagram, if these are the things that you use, then Linux can do it and can do it just fine, and it will stay just as secure as anything you do in the world. So yes, on an old computer, if you want to revitalize it, get on Linux. And Cachy OS is the one that I'm showing off right now. There's many distributions and each do their own thing. Some do it a little bit better than others. Cachy OS is based off of Arch Linux. Arch Linux is a rolling distribution that's not exactly known for being easy to install, so the people at Cachy OS took that rolling model and made it easy to install. Now that we're bringing up the operating system for the first time, we're going to look at some of the things, how it reacts in real time to what you're looking at. The first boot screen is fairly nice. It goes through its little sequence of opening, and now you're asked to log in. This is where you go back to that username and password you created. This is what gets you started on the journey. From login, it took less than 10 seconds to get in. You sure as hell can't do that on Windows. Mac's a little bit better on that, but Windows takes forever to get everything loaded up into its system because there's just so much garbage to add to it. Now, this launch screen is set to come on it when you start it, and I've clicked the button. I don't want it. Now, it says I can install extra apps here, and because I'm fresh to the Arch Linux way of doing things and the Cachy OS way of doing things, I didn't take much time to install any packages. I just kind of looked, did a drop down on a few items, and I wasn't really sure if I should install because I'm really trying to keep the system lean. This is only a development platform, a test bed. I just want to see what I can do with a system I've never used before. Now you see that there's office suites and office type software that you can use. 99% of the time I will always install LibreOffice if it's not on here. But since I don't know what's already installed on here, I'm going to start browsing around. Now, in multimedia, I see that I have a media player. I've not really tried it. Like I said, I'm just starting with this system. And I'm not familiar with KDE anymore. So I'm learning some things as I'm going along, but I'm seeing as I'm going through this that a lot of the programs I'm used to using on other Linux systems are not installed, which can be a good thing. It really is. Now I've seen that there's a terminal app, but now this is starting Firefox. This is your nuts and bolts of working with Linux and the web. Now, I want to install something called OBS, so that's what I'm searching for in this. I want OBS to be on here so that I can get off the camera and go into a video and work with just the video program. Hopefully I've not bored you to tears by dancing around some of this stuff. But you need to learn how to use a terminal, so I pulled up a terminal and I've searched how to install OBS, and I've copied, and now I'm going to paste the command, and the command will do all the work underneath the system. So it's independent. It's going to ask if I want to remove conflicts. Usually I go ahead and remove conflicts because they'll put something that works with the software native to what's here. Most of the time, these programs are stored in a repository that is updated and maintained by the development group. So this development group is working with Arch, and Arch uses the Pac-Man system, and the Pac-Man system knows to look for a specific repository, and that's where we're at. So I've installed OBS. Now if I go to my multimedia folder and click on OBS, it will start up. And because this system is so lean, that was one of the things I wanted with Arch Linux. Arch Linux, and specifically Cachy OS, is supposed to be optimized for speed. That's one thing I'll stress. If it's optimized for speed, sometimes it's not optimized for security. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Now that I've got OBS running, I've got to click through a few things trying to get my hands on getting this running. I need to define my source, which will be adding my computer screen. All right, screen capture through PipeWire. Oh look, fries are done. Reminder, just what I need. If you think that annoys me, imagine me getting thousands of those dings from Microsoft telling me I need to purchase something. That's annoying. Screw AI. I hate the ads. I can ignore AI by not clicking on any of it. And I want to make sure, one of the things I look for on OBS is hide the screen, because you see that constant flow. That constant flow is annoying, but I can't seem to find it. When you have a question on all things Linux, the primary source of your information is going to be the web. But I'm clicking down through each section trying to find hide OBS. I don't want OBS recording itself. I just want to record the desktop. And in Windows and Mac, there's a button that can be clicked, a checkbox that can be ticked that will hide OBS. But on the Linux version, I guess that doesn't exist. And I'm kind of narrating this after the fact, so yes, I found out the hard way. There is no hide OBS on the Linux version. And there's a reason I want this OBS. I want to be able to click through some of this stuff and show you some of the little nuances of what goes into each OS, and why it's important to kind of study not just how to find what you're needing, but also investigate what isn't working. In this case, I pull up a web browser, hide OBS when recording. Now I watched several videos on this trying to find this, and all of them say go to the hide enable windows, the OBS windows, and as you can see here, it's goes to the setting, check the box, click apply and OK. All right, read through that. Okay, window projector, virtual camera, minimize to system tray. I think that's the way I ended up having to go, which, if you're seeing all these various things, so I'm in general. Now, normally under general, under open stats dialog, it's got the hide the OBS from the capture. So since it doesn't exist, I keep looking and keep looking and keep looking for what cause with Linux stuff, even the exact same program is prone to putting stuff in different locations. Usually under appearance, general, and output, you can find stuff hidden that you might need. Now, if you're just using it straight from the website and you're not making any changes, that's what you're looking at. Looking for help. The reason I looked up help is to find out which version am I looking at, because sometimes you might need to put the version number that you're working with in the Google search. In this case, 32.0.4, and I think I screwed that up. But the directions end up being the same. It still says just click the button. But if you've noticed in my question, I've not mentioned that I'm using Linux. And I think I go back and even type in Linux, because that's one of the headaches that you get into is you have to find it specific to Linux. And because Linux has different maintainers on different distributions maintaining their own download areas, sometimes you have to put the program number and the distribution name in, because there might be something specific for Debian that, even though Ubuntu is made from Debian, Ubuntu may do something different. So it's important to know which version of Linux you're using, and it's also important to know which version of the program you're trying to tie into when you're asking these questions. Now, just about everybody goes to Google to ask the questions. Now that's because Google is using AI in the background to answer your question. And for a lot of the time, that is correct. Before Google was this good on answering these questions, your top website to go look for answers for computing was stackoverflow.com. And sometimes you had to make the questions very detailed, but that Stack Overflow, I still recommend it for anybody working with programming or having questions. I would probably recommend it over Reddit, just because I've seen some really wild stuff on Reddit. Now see, the video that I'm watching here shows that exactly where that hide the OBS button is. So I go back to settings, pull it up, and lo and behold, it's not there. It's not where it was in that video. So that goes to show that Linux-based programs are not always 100% one-to-one for the Windows and Mac counterparts. They're there. The hide Windows is only available in Mac and Windows. So there I've got my answer. So hide OBS in Linux becomes the new question. Now, it gives several ways of doing this, and it says add a second monitor, as if everybody's got money for a second monitor. Of course, I laugh at these monitors today because I can remember when flat screen monitors for a 13-inch flat screen monitor was $1,500. Now you can buy them for 99 bucks. Not an impossibility, but it comes with its own headache having a second monitor. But it looks cool to all your friends when you can show them you've got two monitors. You know what? I like this. I'm gonna set up my own key commands while I'm getting started. For OBS, I want the start recording and stop recording on a key press. I usually like using record and stop, R for record, Control R in my case, and come on, Travis, type it up there. Control plus F. The reason I do F is right underneath R. So R to record, F to stop. Lo and behold, it doesn't work. Because once you minimize the screen, technically you're not in the window. If you're not in the window, the program is not the active program, so your key commands are useless. And I tinker around with it trying to get it to work, and lo and behold, it doesn't. So here we are back at the settings, still tinkering around with OBS. All right, show recordings. There are none because the key commands didn't work. Go back to the keys. And if I'm gonna assign those and they're not gonna work, I just say take them out. So I'm gonna try the start recording. I'm gonna start, as you can see, there's a little red dot on the OBS, so that's your identifier that it's working. Now I've hit stopped and the red light's gone. So now I'm gonna try hitting the button after I've shrunk it down. Nope, didn't work. Oh, look. Now I was gonna go more in depth with this video, but I'm going on to 30 minutes with it, and you've probably heard me pontificating enough to last you a lifetime. So, getting back to the checking out the red dot and the absence of the red dot to show you that you're screen recording. I test this one more time to see if it can record or not record, and since it doesn't, then there's no reason for me to keep key commands, because I don't want to accidentally screw up the system with key commands that aren't working and may impact other key commands for other programs. So it's always good to go back and delete this stuff out. Let's go do a quick search, get out of that, go back to OBS, stop recording. Now let's go find this. It's not in the videos file. It's not in the desktop file. Not in the documents, not in the downloads, not in the music. Where did these stupid things save to? Well, it doesn't show the recent files. So go back up to OBS and go to settings. You know, there's multiple ways to get to settings, and go to the advanced, and it's going to tell me where the recordings go to. Now, what I'm actually wanting is the folder location, and sometimes you got to move around to find this. Stream appearance, try output. There it is, output, recording path, home/Travis. That's a Linux quirk. Everything is /home, and then it goes into your name, whatever your name is. And then, as you can see, it's not in a specific folder other than the Travis home folder. And that's not the same as the desktop, nor is it the same as anything else. So, yes, it works. Screen recording looks great. And it even picks up the extra windows, which is its own annoyance. But you can watch videos on Linux as long as those codecs are provided by Linux. And in this case, OBS works with Linux, so it saved it in a .mp4 file, which it can read that specific format. And that makes for a long video. So I'm going to cut off with this video. This is the basic install. This will get you from putting your thumb drive into the computer to actually answering the questions and getting the installation up and running. What I can see with Cachy OS, this is my first time ever using it, is this thing's pretty fast. I'm impressed with its speed, undoubtedly. But in the next video, I'll go over some of the things that you can go through in your first steps of setting up, and I'm sure there's steps that I have forgotten or glossed over and not looked at. As you can see, there's a lot to learn about any operating system. If you're jumping from Windows and you've never owned a Mac, everybody says Macs just work. No, they don't. You will study and you will read a lot of information of how to make it just work. So, same thing with Linux. You've got an old computer that you think may be too old, and Windows will tell you it's old because they want you to buy a new computer to aggravate you over. But you can install Linux. Take a little bit of time. Like I said, as long as you're just surfing the web, going through your browser, doing office software work, Linux is perfectly capable, perfectly fine, and perfectly stable to do that work. This has been Big T. If you like what I've done, hit like and subscribe down at the bottom of the screen. I appreciate everything you've done, and thanks for spending some time with me. I know I'm a little bit long-winded, but I like to talk about things that the average person might think about when they're tinkering with something like this. It's going to be a pain in the butt, and there is going to be a learning curve. But don't be afraid of trying the learning curve. You can do it. It'll be great. Have some fun. Don't throw away your computer if it does everything you want it to do. And when you install Linux, you might be surprised at how fast your computer actually is. It may feel like a brand new system. Come on back and see us again. I'm Big T with Big T Studios. Thanks much.